Facebook. I keep doing that. Hello, YouTube. Live now for 5 seconds. Just have to do something here. I'm going to go on my Facebook page. And I want to share the link to this. But so give me a minute. Get a coffee. If you want a coffee. Let's see. I'm going to try something tonight too. I've been wanting to share articles that I've come across, but I want to be able to do it and be able to show what I'm reading while I'm doing it. And I don't know how to do that. I know there must be a way. So anyway, the lunacy of lockdowns. Now we're in, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 1, 2. We're over a week into this new lockdown period. Numbers are still going up. We've, I think it's 2 of the last 3 days. We've had a record number of cases in Ontario. Still, even at 3,000 odd a day in Ontario, it's still a tiny fraction of the province that has tested positive for this bug, for this virus. Less than 2%, more than 98% of the population of Ontario has not tested positive for COVID. And it's only 1.5% of all Canadians, so 98.5% of Canadians have not tested positive for the coronavirus. But the stupidity, the utter brainless stupidity of these lockdown measures it gets on my nerves. And especially the support it has from people who I would normally consider caring, loving individuals. But that's what fear does to people. It's often been said that stress and fear brings out a person's true character. There's a famous joke where, it's like many jokes, it gets recycled so the characters can change in it, but I'm going to tell it with Richard Nixon and Bill Clinton are on a plane. Make it a boat. Change the context a bit. There's a boat with Richard Nixon and Bill Clinton, and it starts to sink. And everyone says, man the lifeboats. And someone loudly yells out, women onto the lifeboats first. And Tricky Dick says, screw the women. And Bill Clinton says, do you think there's time? You get to see under stressful, fearful situations, people's true character comes out. So I think I'm making fun of both right Richard Nixon and left Bill Clinton. Equal opportunity. Now we're in a situation where the media has done an incredible job at scaring the bejeebers out of everyone with a virus that, this is where I want to learn how to share articles. There's a Denver coroner who took exception to the fact that included in the COVID death numbers are 2 individuals who were killed by gunshot wounds. Everyone talks about the death numbers like, oh, look at how many people have died in the United States. But when you're going to include it, and she was complaining that this was the direction of the CDC that required her, and this was reported by CBS News. And I'm sure by others, but the article I read was by CBS. Now, unless perhaps you think CBS is, fake news, like Donald Trump. I don't know. I don't. It's a coroner with the city of Denver in Colorado. There was a case in Florida where Orange County, Miami, an individual had died on a motorcycle in a motorcycle accident. In this case, it was Fox News reporting it, and people go, "Oh, it's Fox. I don't believe it." But they were interviewing the public health official, the chief public health official for Orange County, and he was trying to explain that, well, maybe COVID did contribute to the accident, so indirectly, so we have to, it has to be included, trying to make, call it apologetics, if you will, trying to defend stupidity. But this is direction of the CDC. So you look at those numbers, and it's the same. Toronto Public Health tweeted out, I put this out the other day, I actually shared it on my timeline on Facebook now, because someone had screenshot the tweet where they said that even those people who don't die of COVID, but simply die with it, like someone having a heart attack, well, it's counted as a COVID death. So, even our own numbers in Canada are not they're not reliable. Call it what it is. We've never done this before with any other disease, just merely having a positive test, and a test that is incredibly inaccurate. That's as per Dr. Barbara Yaffe of Ontario's Associate Chief Medical Health Officer has stated publicly on record at a press conference with Doug Ford that you're going to get false positives almost half the time. And yet, but if you have a positive test and then you die of something, even if it's unrelated, even if your death is caused by a heart attack, they're still going to count you among the COVID numbers because it drives fear, drives panic. And so, that's all background. I mean, if you're just reading the numbers, if you're just listening to the newscasts with their, flashlight under the chin, telling you to be scared, worried, concerned, large percent of people are going to respond like a Pavlovian dog, and they're gonna be scared, worried, and concerned, and and so common sense gets tossed out the window. And so here we are in a situation now where we're in a so-called lockdown, and what that means is, restaurants is closed unless for takeout and delivery only, which is killing the restaurant sector. Just look at the number. There's a publication called blog.to. They must have chronicled at least a dozen restaurants, long established, almost landmark type restaurants that have shut their doors. But maybe you don't care. You don't own a restaurant. You're not a waiter. You're not a waitress. You're not a bus. You're not bussing tables. So it doesn't affect you. Thousands of workers out of work. Big deal. The retail sector. Amazon. Walmart, Costco. You can go there. You can order online from them. But the small business guy with man or woman with a small storefront and small town Ontario now, is forced to shut their doors. A lot of these are just mom and pop shops. So, simply people making a living. And now the government's come in and said, you specifically, you're not allowed to make a living. You're not allowed to sell those products. You have a bookstore. Well, Walmart sells books. Costco sells books. You can order books online. You don't, or through Amazon. You don't have to go into a small town bookstore. Gym, a fitness center, dance studio, whatever the case, closed. Now, is this going to reduce the number of infections happening? We've now got, you probably heard, we now have super COVID, which is even more contagious, even more infectious than regular COVID. And it's spreading. Now, is that a surprise? You can go into the grocery store with hundreds of other people. Touch product, put it back. Touch product, put it back. You can go into Costco. You can go into Walmart. Amazon fulfillment centers, 400 plus cases in their 3 Pearson Airport area facilities, fulfillment centers. They're not closing. Dozens of planes coming in every single day to Toronto, 50, 60, 70 planes from all around the world, that's okay. But, it's so obviously these lockdowns are not going to work. It's brain dead simple logic that says they're not going to work. And for those, and the even worse than that is, as the case numbers go up, I'm constantly coming across people who are saying, "Oh, well, then we just need more lockdowns. We got to do it more." Oh yeah, it doesn't work, so let's do more of what doesn't work. No. I mean, this, we got to make sure people stay in their house and don't go out and blah 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 blah. Let's bring in martial law. Let's make let's go full communist. Let's go full North Korea, Vietnam, China. And you're going to lock people in their houses. I mean, first of all, you can't, because their food security is a major issue, even in a rich country like Canada. People do not have. A lot of people don't even have a week's worth of groceries in their house, let alone 15 plus days. And so you're gonna shut all the grocery stores. You're gonna shut down the supply chain. You want to invite the zombie apocalypse? Well, there you go. Everyone advocating for a harsh shutdown where everyone's forced to stay in their house for 15 days. I don't want to see what'll happen, because it would be, euphemistically speaking, it would be the zombie apocalypse. That's insanity. What's happening now with the lockdowns that are happening now? You're taking away people's income. You're causing depression. Depression leads to substance abuse, alcohol, and drugs. You look at BC, their overdose rate, which they're tracking, is through the roof versus what it would normally be at. Now you're doing all those things. We've shuttered schools again. And now for some children, maybe not yours, right? This is the thing that drives me nuts about the supposedly progressive left, because they're not progressive at all. And they're not even socialistic at all. Everyone loves to, there's a frequent line you hear about, champagne socialists, who love to talk about how they care about, the vulnerable, the marginalized, the poor, while driving in their chauffeur-driven limousine and drinking champagne. That's what they love to do. And this is the group that is most likely going to be saying, "Oh, everyone be good, stay home, stay home, stay safe." Meanwhile, for some children, school is their safe place. Not everyone has a Beaver Cleaver type upbringing. And now you've got, during the first lockdown, it was estimated that somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 million Canadians were out of work. Take away income security, you take away someone's job, you take away their identity. A lot of people fall into alcohol and drug abuse. And that increases spousal and child abuse. And what's the benefit? Increasing cases of COVID, because you've left the grocery stores, the Costco's, the Walmarts, the Amazon fulfillment centers, planes coming in. You've left all that open and are heaping pain, misery, and devastation onto millions of Canadians for no utility. Well, our hospitals will get overwhelmed. That's what, we're up somewhere around 2,000 hospitalizations in Ontario in a population of 14.6 million. And yes, that's just the COVID patients. We still have our regular cancer patients. Cancer is the number one killer of people. COVID's nowhere near. We have a cancer pandemic in this country, and it's never gone away. Heart disease is another huge killer of Canadians. So we have those patients, and now we have a couple thousand total patients in hospital. And I have no doubt it's going to go to 3,000. People get sick. For the longest time, I did not know, I only knew of one person who had had COVID. And the interesting thing is the word went out on social media because I've been anti-lockdown from the beginning, going back to March and April. The stupidity of it was obvious then with the numbers that were being reported out of China and out of Italy. You don't take a howitzer to kill a raccoon. But that's what we're doing. People think it's smart. It's not. It's dumb. It's doing far more damage, far more devastation, far more havoc. It's causing more health. The lockdowns are causing more health problems than COVID. Now, as I said, for the longest time, I only knew of one person, someone with whom I went to high school, way back when in the 80s. And I was expressing online my anti-lockdown sentiment, and I was admonished and told, you have to take this serious. So-and-so is in hospital, fighting for her life. Wow. You ever play the game Telephone back in school, where you start off with a story and it gets passed and passed and passed, and by the time it gets to the last person in the classroom, it's been embellished like crazy? Well, that was the case here. This person who was fighting for their life, infected with COVID, was isolating in a motel room north of the GTA, having contracted it at her workplace, a long-term care center. Didn't want to take it home and isolated in a motel room. But that morphed in the telephone game into fighting for her life. I had this image of her lying on her stomach, prone with a ventilator, intubated with a ventilator. I found that out later. I chatted with her. But now I do actually know now another 4 people who have been infected, part of the 1.5% of Canadians who have tested positive for COVID. One is a family member, sister-in-law, and she is in hospital. She's recovering now. And some will go say, see? Well, would she have been in hospital without COVID? I don't know. She's been in hospital a few times, once or twice a year. It's not unusual. She has health issues. If COVID hadn't been around, and if she'd gone into hospital, I would not have been surprised. Her husband, which they believe was the source, still working, and so not staying home, not staying safe. He had to work. Not everyone has complete income security. Not everyone, families, you need income to live in this world. You may not like it, but it's reality. He went out to work, and it's believed that he brought it home. And he also contracted it. And I don't like to use profanity, but this is a quote. It knocked him on his, Adrian, go to bed. That's the little guy. We'll talk about you after.
Are you seeing?
Yeah, you're on YouTube. Go to bed.
So we done.
Go. You have 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 10 o'clock at night, and he's still not asleep. Talk about him in a second. Talk about kids being out of school. Anyway, back to my family, or my extended family. So my brother-in-law, it knocked him on his posterior. There, I'll keep it clean. Knocked him on his posterior for 3 or 4 days in bed. They have 3 kids. 2 of them tested positive, did not get sick at all. So they didn't have it. They had the virus, maybe, with a test that's 50% inaccurate. But given that their dad and mom both had it, it's likely maybe even all 3 had it. The one who tested negative, it might have been a false negative. None of them got sick. That people walk around like that all the time when the deadly flu viruses are circulating around, and lest anyone think that I'm being hyperbolic by saying, the deadly influenza viruses, they're deadly. Go to Statistics Canada, look up deaths, leading causes of death, top 10 for the year 2018. You'll see that the number 6 leading cause of death that year was influenza, and the number of deaths was 8,511. Big level of death, and that was without massive testing, and without anyone who tests positive who dies of a heart attack or in a car accident or whatever being included in the numbers. I mean, they could probably goose that up. They could have made it 14, 15,000 if they tested like crazy, and then anyone who died, regardless of the cause of death, listed as an influenza death, and we could have huge influenza numbers. Never did that. Why are we doing it now? That's an important question. That's a good question. Why are we doing it now? Obviously the measures we're having aren't working. Closing my son's school down for a week. For what utility? There is none. And some of the kids, unfortunately, don't have stable home environments. They got out of work parents, some of whom, you don't think child abuse and spousal abuse happen? It's out there. And now we've made it worse. But we don't care about that anymore because we're tunnel vision on COVID because we're told to, right? Doing as you're told. Stay home, stay safe. More damage is being done by lockdown than COVID could ever do. Talk to law enforcement in your area. Ask them about suicides in your area. Ask them what it's like now as compared to what we're used to seeing in years previous. I have. And the suicide, they don't list it, someone's cause of death isn't listed as suicide initially. It's listed as suspected suicide. Because you have to do an investigation. It can take months, can even take a year or more before it's actually determined. That's why when you go to Statistics Canada now and they're giving provisional data, they're saying in one column is cause as yet unknown or undetermined. This is not going to end. The cases are going to keep climbing. We're at 3,000 plus a day now happening, 2 of the last 3. And I said it before, we're looking at a positivity rate that fluctuates between 3 on the low end, 7 on the high end. And they're talking about getting us up to 100,000 tests a day. So you get a 5% positivity rate, and we're going to have 5,000 cases. Don't lose your minds. Adrian, go to bed. Now, close the door. I don't like him hearing about this. It was my little outlet. Life is peaches and cream. We don't talk about it except to the extent of, I was really happy. Talked about this before. This is our mask that we wear in this house. The legislation, the public health guidelines stipulate that if you want to be in an indoor public place now, then you have to wear a face covering, and it has to cover the nose, the chin, and the mouth. Well, guess what? This piece of plastic with these 2 little bumps on it, they keep it from sitting, so it's not right over your mouth. Create some space, just like a regular mask. And there you go. Bob's your uncle. I am now in compliance with the public health guidelines. My chin's a little slippery. And I can go shopping, and I do. I've even been in a medical clinic, 2 of them. Good enough. Now, I know some people will say, oh, that's useless. This does nothing. Like, oh yeah, so does this. Does nothing. Because SARS-CoV-2 is an aerosol. That's been out for months. Came out in the summer. Although Health Canada didn't wake up to it until October, but Health Canada has always been a day late and a dollar short on everything during this pandemic. This thing, most people just, you go to the grocery store, everyone's got it on like this, totally useless. Even if you cover your nose and pinch it, there's still big gaps there, big gaps here. I'm pulling on the material, huge holes. Aerosols will go all around and even right through this thing. And then there's your eyes. They're aerosols. If you don't have a immune system, I was talking about my sister-in-law before. If she got the flu, though, she would end up in hospital. It's one of those things. People get sick. It happens. Norwalk virus, Zika virus, swine flu, H1N1, Hong Kong flu. We have had pandemics before. The last two declared pandemics, as per the CDC, were H1N1 2000, I believe it was 2009. And before that, it was the Hong Kong flu pandemic from 1968 to 1970. We have had pandemics before. We have never quarantined the healthy. We have never shut down businesses. We've never forced healthy kids, to stay home. If you see someone opening a business and you agree, if they're opening up their business in defiance of lockdown, maybe trying to save their livelihood, maybe trying to, stave off bankruptcy, stave off poverty, I'll go in and shop there. Just isn't right. And the difficulty is safety is a primary need. Everyone wants to feel safe. We got the government, we got media telling it, we got some of the health officials, pretty much all the public health officials, saying that we need to do this. You can find alternative opinions, but they're fact-checked and censored. But there are experts out there with Harvard, Oxford, Yale. One of them, I'll talk about him on another show. Ioannidis with Stanford, University of Stanford, one of the originators of this so-called Barrington Declaration, which everyone thinks, the virtue signaling mob, the champagne sipping social activists think it's conspiracy theory and all this garbage. It's real. Science is not about consensus. Science is about evidence. It evolves. On masks, we've gone backwards. We've gone from the highest level of science, which is randomized control and cluster trials that say masks have no proven benefit at all for either the person wearing them or others. But we've gone down to lower levels of science, lab experiments and comparative studies that suggest that there might be one. And people have taken the might and replaced it and said they do work, and they believe it. And we've got, to suggest otherwise would be like someone suggesting in the year 1200 that the world is round. Basically the flat earthers think these work. But ever since mask mandates have gone out, what's happened to the case numbers? These are the only time case numbers I'm convinced with my total layman, no degrees in epidemiology, infectious disease, or virology, but have taken courses undergraduate level science courses. But no degrees, no accreditation. But it appears that, as was suggested at the start, SARS-CoV-2 has a seasonal element to it. It's like flu. People get flu in the summer, but majority of cases happen in the fall, winter, October to March, April. That's considered flu season. There's still flu cases throughout the rest of the year, just at a much lower level. Looks like SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19, or super COVID, it's the same thing. Seems to dip in the summer. They were down, I was reading the other day, New Zealand, it's summer in the southern hemisphere. New Zealand's down to something like 55 cases. Everyone says, oh, it's because their lockdown worked. Yeah, it's summer now. Now there's the Ontario Hospital Association. They're asking people to sign the pledge. I'm going to stay inside. I'm not going to, limit my activity. I'm pledging to do it, and I'm encouraging all my friends and everything to do it. And one of their points is that it worked in the spring, when March, April, May. The reason the case numbers went down is because the lockdown worked. I'm sorry, the lockdown worked my ass. That's to have a medical establishment player like the Ontario Hospital Association throwing science out the window, because what they're suggesting is correlation proves causation. And any student of science, even at high school level, knows causation does not prove, or rather correlation does not prove causation. The number of the whale population in the world starting in 1900 to the year 2000 decreased precipitously. At the same time, the divorce rate rose exponentially. So can we infer from that killing whales increases the rate of divorce? That's their rationale. I'm using a bit of a ridiculous example, but it makes the point. Just because the numbers went down from March, April, May, when we got into June, just because they went down in the summer months, doesn't mean that necessarily the lockdown measures had anything to do with it at all. It could be simply a seasonal component of COVID, and that it doesn't transmit as much in warmer temperatures, and especially as we're all outside. So, we're transmitting like crazy now under lockdown. June, July, August, September, when the lockdown measures were eased off, the transmission numbers were lower. So if you're going to go with correlation and causation, you could say the complete reverse, that lockdown causes an increase in cases. Certainly appears to be the case now. And if we hit 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, maybe even 7,000 cases a day, well, then maybe we should try something other than lockdowns. People need to build their immunity, right? Having a healthy immune system is good no matter what the virus is, SARS-CoV-2, Zika virus, whatever virus, influenza virus. You want to have a healthy immune system. That's your best defense against any pathogen. And staying inside all the time, not getting vitamin D, which is essential to a healthy immune system. Stressing out over COVID. Have a laugh every now and again. Watch Seinfeld. I'd love to say go visit a neighbor, and I have no issue with that. If it's good for your mental health, stress is a killer. Sustained levels of high stress diminish the immune system. Look it up. Stress, the silent killer. You can read the article. Stress is a good thing in short bursts, but sustained levels of high stress are not bad. A good thing to do is to go to church, be around people. We're social creatures. Oh, we're not allowed now. Show you one other thing. Oh, I can turn it. You're going to get it. I printed this off. I don't know how well it shows up. I've got it upside down. No, that was where it set up. It's seeable. Hold that up there if anyone wants to screenshot it. That's section 176 of Canada's Criminal Code. I'll read it. Every person is guilty of an indictable offense and liable to imprisonment for a term of not more than 2 years, or is guilty of an offense punishable on summary conviction who, by threats or force, unlawfully obstructs or prevents or endeavors to obstruct or prevent an officiant from celebrating a religious or spiritual service or performing any other function in connection with their calling, or knowing that an officiant is about to perform, is on their way to perform, or is returning from the performance of any of the duties or function mentioned in paragraph A, assaults or offers any violence to them, or arrests them on a civil process, or under the pretense of executing a civil process. Here's where the really good stuff hits. Disturbing religious worship or certain meetings. So this is section 2 of Article 176 of the Criminal Code. Everyone who willfully disturbs or interrupts an assemblage of persons met for religious worship or for a moral, social, or benevolent purpose is guilty of an offense punishable on summary conviction. Everyone, this is subsection 3, everyone who, at or near a meeting referred to in subsection 2, willfully does anything that disturbs the order or solemnity of the meeting is guilty of an offense punishable on summary conviction. Date modified, this is directly off the Government of Canada's website, was 2020, December 15th. Now, do I expect that a police officer is going to charge a bylaw officer with violating section 176 of Canada's Criminal Code? No, I don't. But there is such a thing in this country as citizen's arrest. I want it to happen. I do want to see that happen. Anyway, I'll leave you with that. Keep well. Help your neighbors. Help those who are hurting. I used to go for a coffee when going for a coffee was allowed with a gentleman who attended the church I attended. And this individual's fallen on hard times and is living in a mission as far as I'm aware. So I'm going to be collecting warm clothes, blankets, anything like that I can, and taking them to the mission, hopefully next week. So look after your friends, look after your relatives. Do whatever you have to do. COVID, it's a virus. We've had viruses for millennia. And yes, sadly, some people will die. 300,000 people in this country die in a year, 800 plus a day. We just went through a Christmas season where we were encouraged to stay apart from one another. Well, for roughly 300,000 Canadians, this was their last Christmas. And for the family, friends of those 300,000 people, this was their last chance to spend Christmas, the holiday season, with a beloved grandmother, grandfather, mother, father, dear aunt, dear uncle. Last chance. And the government said, no, you're not allowed. And we're also seeing, might as well talk about it, Rod Phillips, Minister of Finance for the province of Ontario, flew down to St. Bart's. There's now an NDP member who has apparently a sick and dying relative, I believe it's a grandmother in Greece, and she went to visit her, the whore, and the NDP, who used to care about the poor, the marginalized, the vulnerable. Now they don't anymore. Now they're sacking their, taking away these shadow cabinet responsibilities from their member for having done something perfectly legal and perfect and very humane and very human, going to visit a dying relative, a grandmother, and they've alleviated her of some of her responsibilities. That's garbage. That is absolute garbage. You know, even with Rod Phillips going down into the same parts, you know, the only thing that doesn't pass the smell test there is the fact that he tried to hide it. You know, he tried to create the impression, went into a subterfuge to try and make it appear, you know, this wonderful world of technology, put a backdrop of Queen's Park during Zoom type calls, and, you know, having a pre-recorded message from a living room in Ajax somewhere, you know, creating the impression that he's in Canada when in fact he's enjoying St. Bart's, which is where I would love to be, or anywhere in the Caribbean. I can't afford St. Bart's or Turks and Caicos, but, you know, Dominican, Cuba, you know, and we're the lucky ones. You know, if lockdown isn't that bad, that means you're privileged. You know, income security, stable home life, we're privileged. God bless. You know, it's not like that for everyone. You know, I talk about my faith on occasion. Jesus' second greatest commandment, he said, was to love thy neighbor as thyself. And it's throwing people out of work. Is that loving thy neighbor? Is taking away their support networks, taking away worship? Is that loving thy neighbor? No, it's not loving thy neighbor. That's heaping more pain and misery. That's pouring salt into the wound of your neighbor. And do not give me this bit about Paul's letter to the Romans talking about obey the civil authorities. Because if you know anything about Scripture, you know Paul on at least 3 occasions wrote letters from jail. He did not always obey the civil authorities. Right. So, anyway, that's enough. Little guy still won't go to sleep. And it's getting late. 10:26. End stream.